The first time he told me he loved me, we had been married for 6 years. 6 years of shared meals, shared beds, shared silences so long I could hear the wood stove settling in the dark. 6 years of children born and named and tucked under quilts I had pieced myself. 6 years of his boots at the door every evening and my hands always moving, kneading, scrubbing, mending. And not once, not a single time had he said those words. When he finally said them, we were sitting at the kitchen table after supper, the lamp between us, the children already asleep, and he said it the way he would say, "The hay needs turning." Flat. Factual. Like love was a thing you reported, not a thing you gave. I said, "Thank you." Because that was the only language I had for it. If you have ever loved someone and felt completely alone inside that love, stay with me. Because what I am about to tell you about 13 years inside an old colony Mennonite marriage is going to make you feel something, and I think you need to hear it. My name is Miriam, and this is Miriam Speaks. This is the channel where I say out loud the things I spent a lifetime being taught to swallow. I grew up old colony Mennonite outside a small farming settlement in southern Manitoba. I left, and it cost me nearly everything I had, and I am still here, still talking, because someone has to. If you want the truth from someone who actually lived it, subscribe to this channel, like this video, and turn on the notification bell, because there is so much more I have not said yet. Here is something the outside world does not understand about the men in a community like mine. They are not cold by accident. They are cold by design. The unwritten rule of our settlement, the one nobody ever wrote down because everybody already knew it, left no room for emotional expression in men. A man who spoke tenderly in front of others was suspect. A man who cried was considered weak in spirit. A man who told his wife she was lovely, who reached for her hand at the supper table, who said, "I missed you." When she came back from visiting her sister, that man was thought prideful, showy, too worldly for his own good. Humility in our world was silence, and husbands were raised from the time they could walk to be very, very humble. What that produces inside the walls of a marriage like mine took me years of sitting with an English counselor after I left to find the right word for. The word is emotional unavailability. But inside the settlement, we did not have that word. We had a different word. We called it steadiness. We called it being a good provider. We called it being a godly husband because he did not drink, did not chase after other women, did not raise his voice. He simply was not there. Even when he was sitting 2 feet across from me, we were married on a Tuesday in late September, the way weddings in our settlement always fell mid-week so as not to interrupt the Sunday order. Nearly 250 people crowded into my father's machine shed, swept clean for the occasion. The minister preached about yielding, about a wife's place under her husband, about building a household that honored the Lord. My husband stood beside me, shoulders square, face calm, and I thought, I am marrying a good man. I am marrying a steady man. I was 17. I had met him at a youth gathering 8 months before. He had offered to drive me home in his truck, and my heart had done what hearts do at 17, which is mistake steadiness for depth. Our wedding night was everything a first night is in a home like ours. Fragile, uncertain, neither of us quite knowing what we were doing. Both of us moving through it in a silence so thick it had weight to it. Afterward, he fell asleep almost immediately, and I lay in the dark listening to the dog shift on the porch below, trying to locate what I was feeling. I could not find it. It had no name yet. The first year of marriage, I told myself the tenderness would come. We were still learning each other. He was a man of work, not words. Wasn't that what my mother had always said about my own father? You do not need pretty words if a man stays, if a man builds, if a man provides. So I watched him build. He was extraordinary at it. The fence lines were always straight. The granary was patched before the first hard frost. The woodpile was always stacked higher than we would ever need. He was the kind of husband other women pointed to and said, "You are so blessed." And I was. I knew I was. I said it at sewing circles when asked. I said it at church. I folded it into my prayers at night like something I was trying to press flat and keep. But here's the truth I could never say at the sewing circle. A straight fence line has never once made a woman feel less alone. By year 3, we had 2 children. By year 5, 3. I was cooking for a family before the sun was fully up most mornings, nursing a baby with one arm and stirring porridge with the other. And somewhere inside the architecture of all that busyness, I stopped waiting for tenderness and started organizing my life around its absence. This is something almost no one talks about, not inside a settlement and honestly not enough outside one either. The way a woman learns to need less. The way she quietly rebuilds her interior world to fit the space she has actually been given, instead of the space she was promised marriage would be. I found my softness in other places. In my children's faces in the early morning, in long talks with the women at Quilting Bees, those gathering days where we would piece blankets together and the conversation would run free in a way it never could at home. In the particular quiet of dawn, before anyone else in the house woke, when the kitchen belonged to me alone and the day had not yet made its demands. I was not unhappy in the way people imagine when they hear a story like this. I want to be precise about that, because the outside world tends to flatten things into simple shapes. Trapped wife, cruel husband. I was not trapped by cruelty. I was trapped by a system that had taught both of us, my husband and me equally, that this was simply what marriage was supposed to feel like. Here is what I mean by that. He did not know he was withholding anything. That is the part that took me the longest to understand. He had grown up watching his own father do the very same thing. Back straight, words few, love expressed through labor and presence and the reliable turning of the seasons. His father had never once said, "I love you," to his mother in front of the children. His father had never reached across a table to touch her hand. And his mother, bless her, a woman of extraordinary endurance, had built her whole life around that absence, the same way I was beginning to build mine. It was inheritance, not malice. A silence passed down so quietly through the generations that no one even recognized it as something being handed over. If you grew up in a home where love was shown but never spoken, where presence was supposed to be enough, where asking for more felt like ingratitude, I want you to hear this clearly. You were never wrong for wanting words. By year 7, something in me began to shift. It was small at first, a restlessness I could not assign a cause to. I started noticing things I had trained myself not to see. The way he never asked how I was actually feeling. The way a whole day could pass between us like a creek we were both standing beside but never crossing. The way I could be sitting in a room full of family and still feel like the only person in it. I began asking questions in my prayers that frightened me. Not questions about God exactly, but questions about whether the life I was living was the only shape a life was allowed to take. There was a woman in our settlement, older, widowed, who had been raised English and had converted into the faith as a young bride, so she had lived on both sides of the fence. I found reasons to be near her. I never asked her anything directly, because I did not yet have direct questions. I only knew that standing near her felt like standing near an open window. One afternoon, with no warning at all, as though she had read something written on my face that I had not known was there, she said to me, "A good man is not always enough, and a woman knowing that does not make her ungrateful." I have thought about those 2 sentences nearly every day since. Now is a good time to pause for just a moment and say, if this story is reaching something in you, please subscribe to this channel, like this video, and turn on the notification bell. I tell these stories because I believe they matter, and I believe that you finding this video today is not an accident. I stayed for 13 years. I want to be honest about why, because the real reasons are more complicated than fear alone. I stayed because I loved him. Not the sweeping, cinematic love that the outside world sells in every song and every film, but a real, worn, daily kind of love. The love of someone who knows exactly which floorboard creaks and steps over it so the baby will not wake. The love of someone who has seen you at your very worst and stayed anyway. That is a love. It is simply not the only kind there is. I stayed because leaving meant being put under the ban. It meant my children watching their grandmother's door close to them for good. It meant my sisters not answering when I called. The cost of going was never abstract to me. It was the actual faces of the people I had loved since I first opened my eyes in this world. And I stayed because I had been taught so completely that the teaching had become indistinguishable from my own believing that wanting more than I had been given was a form of pride, that longing itself was a kind of sin, that a good woman shaped herself to fit her life rather than the other way around. But the restlessness never left. It only grew quieter, more patient, like something that had decided it could simply wait me out. The moment I knew I could not stay came on an ordinary evening, not a dramatic one. No raised voices, no single breaking point I could point a finger at later. It was a Thursday in early November, cold already. The children were in bed. I was sitting at the kitchen table while he read his paper and the lamp was burning low, and I thought with a clarity I had never once had before, I do not exist to him. Not as a whole person, I exist as a function. The woman who keeps this house running. And he exists the very same way to himself. Neither of us, not once, has ever been asked to be more than that. That thought did not feel like anger. It felt like grief. The quiet, enormous kind. I began making a plan that very night. It took 2 more years before I actually walked out the door. Leaving broke things that have not entirely healed, and I will not pretend otherwise. The shunning was swift and total. My mother's face the last time I saw her, my oldest daughter, 13 by then, standing in the yard watching me go and not waving. Those images do not leave easily. They sleep lightly, and certain ordinary things still wake them. The smell of wood smoke, the sound of a horse and cart, a quilt pattern I happened to recognize in a store window. But I also walked into an English counselor's office for the first time at 32 years old. And she asked me a question that no one in my entire life had ever asked me before. She said, "What do you want? Not what does your husband need? Not what does the church require? Not what does your family expect? What do you, yourself, want?" I sat in that chair for a long time and could not answer her. I had to learn the question itself before I could even begin to form a reply. That is what 13 years inside that marriage had done to me. It had not broken me, but it had made me a stranger to my own wanting. And that, more than any single moment of pain, is what I think deserves to be named out loud. I am not telling you that men raised in settlements like mine are monsters. They are not. They are men raised inside a system that pressed the tenderness out of them in exactly the same motion that it pressed submission into their wives. The harm was never personal. It was structural. It was old, older than any of us, and it had been called holy for so long that no one ever thought to check whether God had actually asked for it. My husband was a faithful man. He never once betrayed me. He worked without complaint, year after year. He loved our children the only way he knew how, which was to provide for them completely and hold them rarely. He was a good man caught inside a system that had handed him no tools for the kind of goodness I needed most from him. If you are in a marriage right now where you feel invisible, not abused exactly, not unloved exactly, but unseen, I want you to know that invisible is its own particular kind of lonely. It is a real thing, it has a name, and it is allowed to matter. I want to pause here again and say, if this story has stayed with you this far, please subscribe to this channel, like this video, and turn on the notification bell. There is so much more I am carrying that I have not said yet, and every time you show up here, it tells me to keep going. Someone asked me once, a few years after I left, whether I regretted those 13 years. I sat with that question the same way I used to sit with the hardest prayers, not rushing toward an answer. Here, finally, is what I told them. I do not regret the children. I do not regret the faith that still lives in me, wounded and rebuilt and entirely real. I do not regret learning what endurance looks like from the inside, because I carry that knowledge in my bones now. It is simply part of the structure of who I am. What I do regret is the silence, my own silence most of all. The years I spent translating my longing into something small enough to fit inside the life I had been handed. The mornings I woke before dawn and stood alone in that kitchen, feeling the full weight of being unknown by the man who slept just down the hall, and said nothing, did nothing, only tied on my apron and lit the stove. I was never too young to raise children and run a household and carry a settlement's expectations on my back. I was too young to understand that love without language is a gift wrapped in paper you are never allowed to open. If you grew up in a world where silence was called strength, where asking for more was called pride, where you learned to make yourself small so the people around you could stay comfortable, I see you. If you are sitting somewhere right now feeling alone inside a life that looks, from the outside, like it should be more than enough, I see you too. You are not ungrateful. You are not faithless. You are not wrong for wanting to be known. You are simply someone who deserved words. You always did. And if no one in your world has said them to you yet, I am saying them now. Subscribe to this channel, like this video. Turn on that notification bell because I have more truths I am still learning how to speak. And honestly, I think I need to say them just as much as you need to hear them. Until next time, choose your freedoms wisely. They might just save your life.